Hello and welcome to Jay's Fantasy Sports. This is a new fantasy sports channel concentrating predominantly on golf and football. This week we're previewing the Valero Texas Open, which starts on Thursday. It's in its traditional position a week prior to the US Masters. Players will be looking to hone their games in advance of the Masters or even trying to win the tournament to actually qualify for the US Masters. This includes Ricky Fowler, who has struggled somewhat in the last 12 months and is at this moment in time not playing at Augusta. One player that won't be winning is Dustin Johnson, who pulled out of the tournament yesterday, which leaves Tony Finau as the most expensive player at 11,000. A player who you could certainly make a case for, but at that price, a player who doesn't win very often, you really would like to think your number one player could win, and Finau is not the greatest at seeing these tournaments home, although certainly will compete this week, and certainly a player who I would probably try and get into my fantasy teams next week, because I think he has a good US Masters record and seems to compete better at majors really than standard tournaments. I think he'll be trying to hone his game more so for next week, so he won't be making any of my lineups. But one player that will is Jordan Spieth. Not a favourite player of mine necessarily, and doesn't seem to have the game, to win tournaments. When you look at the bare statistics, but certainly is an elite putter, and that's what wins golf tournaments. For all the driving, the 400-yard drives at the end of the day, he's trying to get the ball in the hole, and Spieth has started to do that much better. He will never win any tournaments off the tee. A short, inaccurate driver by world golf standards, but certainly a player that gets it done, and his statistics, his shots gained approach, shots gained around the green and putting are back to normal levels. He has finished third here previously, and in recent weeks or in recent tournaments has 3 top 15s, which bodes well, for a good finish. He lives in Texas, so he would certainly be keen to win this tournament. I don't think he's just here to make up the numbers, and it's certainly a player that I would pick out of that top section. Into the 9,000s, a clutch of players here that you could certainly start your lineups with. Corey Connors probably at 9,500 being my one of my favourites at least. The current holder of this, winning it in 2019, the tournament obviously not being held last year. Connors is the opposite of Spieth, an elite ball striker, a fantastic driver, great statistics from tee to green. Putting is what can let him down, but that is much improved, and that is something that I think if he does put, and clearly he did put well last season at this tournament, or last in 2019, gives him a great opportunity. And again, if you avoid Spieth, maybe Connors would be your first man in. Also Ryan Palmer, a player who really seems to be overperforming this season, but has played well at Texas previously. Although he's missed his last 2 cuts here, it's sort of, he wasn't really on this elite run that he's on at the moment, but has finished 6th, 4th and 6th, I think in 17, 18 and 19, or 16, 17 and 18, but 3 top 10 finishes in recent years, so worthy of the price. But the one player I think people are going to be drawn to, and possibly the most owned player maybe, will be Charlie Hoffman, a player that 9,200 seems overpriced, but you just look at the raw data and you see that he's won the tournament. He's come second here last season to Connors. He's finished third here twice. He's played here so many times. He knows the course really like the back of his hand, and has been playing well this season. 17th at the Honda and 10th prior to that. 34th last week, which is disappointing, but again, it's a sort of a moderate tournament that you wouldn't think would be high on his priority, but I think this certainly will be high on his priority. Considering his status and his ranking, I think he would absolutely, like Spieth, love to win this tournament. So he would be certainly a player that I'd be looking to get into. I'll certainly be overweight on Hoffman. One final player that is worthy of mention is Brandon Steele, 9,100. again, has won this tournament here 2011 and has a good record here after that, up to 2016, where he finished 13th. In previous years, has made the cut but hasn't really challenged, but finished third at the Honda last time out. And again, another player you could easily pivot from Hoffman, who will be around 18 to 20% owned, to I think a sort of a single figure ownership for Steele. So certainly worthy of looking at. Further down in the eights, Chris Kirk is a player that stands out. A player who's definitely on the comeback trail now, having had problems off the course, which have been well documented. But these US players, they really love this bounce back title, and Kirk is definitely on that list, having a good season, but has predominantly performed well here in Texas. Three top 15 finishes in his last four starts, two 8th place finishes included in that. Playing well again this year, 25th last time out of the Honda, but certainly is a standout player in that 8,000. You could look at Cameron Davis, who I think may have just gone over the top. He has had a good season, but I don't know, has missed a couple of cuts recently. Zach Johnson, worthy of a mention, not a player I play often, but 8th at the Honda and 5th here in 2018. So again, if you're a Zach Johnson man, this is the week to play him. Will probably make 1 out of 10 of my lineups, because I think he's worthy. Keegan Bradley, another player who I don't pick regularly, but again, good form this season, certainly, whether you like him as a player or not. Certainly he's in form this season and has some form here previously. Further down into the 7s, two players who would bracket together, Danny Willett and Brandon Grace. Two former world, I wouldn't say elite, but certainly world players, who seem again to be a little bit on the comeback trail. Grace has won already this season, and Danny Willett, I think, has won in Europe and has also contended much more regularly this year than the previous 2 years. Grace, as I say, I bracket the two together. They're a very similar price. Grace has finished 9th and 10th at San Antonio, so again, well worth consideration at the price, and I don't think either will be particularly owned. Further down, Denny McCartney, probably probably the top putter in the world now, statistically. But he's, there's other parts to his game that are certainly improving, and therefore, not somebody you always would go for. But his strokes gained on the green, he's off the scale at times. 4 and 5 shots gained on the green, but some other aspects of his game do seem to be coming round. If he can just break even in other areas statistically, then he's a player that certainly can outscore his 7,300 price tag. But the player I like is Sam Ryder, 2nd last week, 8th at the Honda, has made the cut here on his last 2 visits, but he's a much better player now than he was then. Certainly at 7,400, a player that will be making a lot of my lineups. And beyond Ryder, at 7,100 is a player called Chase Seaford. Maybe people haven't heard of Seaford, and he's not a player that has done huge amounts in world golf. However, finished 18th last week and finished 3rd at the Honda, and 15th, had a 15th finish in his tournament prior to that. So 3 top 20 finishes at 7,100. I don't know too much about him. I have put him in my Draftkings teams previously, not recently. I can't claim that I had him when he finished 3rd. But you look at some of his statistics and they look fair, what I would call fair. He doesn't seem to excel in any particular area. He seems to be steady, and I think it's a steady player that you want this week. So Chase Seaford at 7,100. Mention for another player I don't pick very often, but statistically seems to tick certainly the strokes gained approach, which is Matthew Naismith, a player I don't read right, but certainly at 7,100 is a player that could do well this week. After that, I think we are going to have to find a player in the 6,000 area. And there's probably three players that stand out for me. Kevin Chappell is certainly one at 6,900, who has been at a world level, has sort of gone off the rails in the last 2 years. I'm not exactly sure. I need to probably find out why that was, whether that was injury or whether that was personal. But he bounced back last week with the 13th at the Honda, but he has won here, and he has got a fourth place finish as well. So that's excellent, really, from Kevin Chappell. So I think he's a Texas-based player. 6,900 could be your last man in, as could Jim Furyk. Again, a player who has done it all in the game, but he's much more consistent than I think people would give him credit for. Missed the cut at the Honda, but prior to that, 2 top 30 finishes, and has 2 top 30 finishes at this tournament in 2019 and 2018. So certainly a player who could again be your last man in at that price, as could Will Gordon. Really a player who's consistently making cuts, which at the price 6,800 is kind of all you want. But I think he has got some upside as well. I think he could definitely finish as a top 10, or he could just make the cut, finish top 30, but be that man that sort of brings home the money if you've got 5 other players that are in that top 10, and you kind of just sometimes need that player to slide in. But certainly Will Gordon, he's playing well this season, and I think he's pretty certain to make the cut at least. So Spieth is a player that I would probably be looking at the top end, and 2 of the 4 from Connors, Palmer, Hoffman and Steele. I like Kirk, as I've said, a player that I think could go well this week. Willett or Grace are worth a mention, but maybe they will be difficult to get in the team if you are looking at the 2 of the top end players. So Denny McCartney, Sam Ryder especially, and Chase Seaford, a new name to some, but a player that seems to be on a roll at the moment. Rounded out there with Chappell, Gordon and Furyk to finish your lineup.